an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Wall of Storms, chapters 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35. In these chapters, Gin Mazzotti gets gripped up. I do not care for any of how this went down. Kuni is being a little bit of a shit, and I'm a tiny bit disappointed in him. And I want desperately to know what is going on with Timu. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very, very much to Kyle for commissioning this episode. Kyle's in the chat and has something to say. He says, so Ken Liu put out a short story collection last night that I thought might have the release date. It didn't, but there was an excerpt from book 3 and it was lit. Ooh. Oh boy. Okay. Ken Liu is breaking my heart here. Because basically what the first book did was overcome a despot, a tyrant, and show us that just because somebody is being taken down, it doesn't mean that what follows will be an improvement. And then gave us what we all thought we wanted in Kuniguru as the regent, as the eventual emperor. And then this book is focusing on, well, what happens when the war is won and people are sort of left to just live and try and make the best of a peaceful world and actually govern. And the answer to that tends to be a lot of infighting and squabbling about things that are ultimately either meaningless, like outright meaningless, or people imagine slights that aren't actually there because their pride is more of a tipping point than it used to be. And that's what I feel like is really coming across to me in these chapters lately, is that previously when we were dealing with an outright war, everybody seemed to be aware that, well, I need to put aside my pride for the sake of our cause. I need to trust in Kuniguru because he is better than the alternative. And even though I may not agree with everything, it's certainly going to be better than it is now. I need to bide my time and get through because I want to reach a point where I can actually exact real change. And that can only happen during peacetime. So I'm going to work towards peace above all. And that is extremely interesting because you would think that once they achieve peace, focusing on what they allegedly said they wanted would be the thing. But it does not appear to be the thing. Once peace is achieved, then people begin to get petty, get paranoid, and this leads to a lot of either miscommunications or it's like some of these things have been miscommunications. Some of them have been a complete lack of communication because both parties feel that they should not have to communicate. There's this sort of, what's going on with these like people is reminding me of being in a marriage and feeling that your partner should know what it is you need. And there's a lot of like critique out there about how like, well, you have to tell somebody what you need. And that if you don't communicate what you need, then you have to take responsibility partially for the fact that you're not getting what you need. And a lot of women, especially, feel that, well, I shouldn't have to communicate that I need some help with basic tasks around the house because it's a really obvious fucking thing that if you were an adult, you would recognize. And the fact that I need to point it out to you, I'm not your mother and you shouldn't need that. But in this case, what's going on with like the country is that they are not communicating because they think, well, Kuniguru has to know that I did all of this for him. And so he kind of owes me. And I am going to simultaneously trust that he knows me better than that, but also do things to guard against maybe him not knowing better than that. And throughout, never explain to him what I'm actually doing or feeling, and thus make myself look highly, highly suspect. So it's a weird like combo of entitlement on the one hand, because these people have gone through so much with him that they really believe that they have earned something. And also like this worry and mistrust that maybe, even though they think that they are more protected than they are, maybe they're wrong. And there's an awareness there that they could be wrong. And it's sort of sad to realize how much Kuni also is like kind of coming at it with that sort of perspective where he's like, they certainly wouldn't do X, Y, Z to me. We've been through too much. But then immediately it's followed up with, but have we? Have they? Don't they? Like, and nobody is actually being honest with one another because they are all so afraid of offending the other, of making the other look bad in front of groups. Like there's a lot of that kind of like politics of reputation and appearance of support where it's like, well, if I reprimand them in front of so-and-so, then they are going to look weak because I have said something. The whole thing is less direct when war isn't there to simplify it all. And it's extremely interesting to me to realize that like who is on your side and is the best choice for you as an advisor when you are in the middle of a war may be the exact opposite of who you need when you are, working through a peacetime. But that does not help you when you are trying to figure out what rewards to give people who were there for you during the war. Like Gin, she helped Kuni win the war, but she doesn't know how to handle herself politically without her pride involved. And what could Kuni possibly have done for her without letting her be queen, without insulting her? What could he have given her that would be adequate after everything? But she's not willing to like look at doing things a different way or realize that maybe the way that she's been handling things has been really teetering on the edge of insulting here and there, especially with like, last book, she takes this island for herself sort of as a test to see whether Kuni actually trusts her. And he lets her have it. And he's like willing to play the game with her in that sense and say, I see what you're doing. And I'm okay with letting you have this, but we've really got to keep this in balance, don't we? He is willing to concede a little bit, but rather than seeing that for the sort of, what's the word I want? Rather than seeing that as the mark of respect that it is, it feels like she continues to feel like she isn't given what she's really owed. And I'm kind of like, Gin, you got away with something that a lot of other people, if they tried it, it would have gotten them executed. Like, you've already been given a lot of leeway that others haven't. And the fact that you still seem to feel like you should get more than everyone else around you in terms of respect or in terms of like leadership and opportunities, it makes me feel like you don't respect Kuni, if anything. And I'm going to keep calling him Kuni. I mean, I've been saying, but I'm going to keep doing that. So anyway, we're going to, and I would like to say too, that even saying all that and feeling like Gin is her own worst enemy in a lot of ways, I am not totally disagreeing with her assessment of what's going on with Kuni by the end of this section. So, all right, let's get this party started. So chapter 30 begins with ZOMI's secret. And guys, I am disgusted with Gia. This is the thing that is so like frustrating, is that I'm starting to realize Gia is one of those like for the greater good types. And she has done something that for me is low-key unforgivable, which is she has taken a person who believed the best of her, who believed in the best for Dara, and she has turned their attributes, their positive attributes, into a weapon to be used against them in a way that they are totally aware it's happening as it's happening. So ZOMI, initially, she didn't get it. She didn't know how she was being used. She didn't understand Gia's whole game. But then once she knows it, it's made very explicit that, oh yeah, I am completely making you do something that is against your conscience because I'm holding somebody that you love hostage, essentially. And I am fine with you living your life knowing that's what's happening to you. And there's a part of me that wishes that ZOMI could have continued on in blissful ignorance, working for Gia without the awareness that she was doing harm. But Gia does not give her that. And, you know, I don't really wish that. I want ZOMI to know what's going on. But just there's such... ZOMI has already been burned so many times by those who run things that I feel Gia may be creating an enemy that she is not ready for here. I don't think Gia will or could understand exactly the kind of hatred ZOMI has for the system that she was born into, that she has suffered under for so long already. And if anybody is going to be motivated to really cut Gia back down to size after all of this, it is ZOMI. And I don't know that Gia is ready for that. I don't think she expects that smoke. So we start off with ZOMI telling Gia that she will not be signing these papers, this report that is essentially proof of Gin Mizoti's intent to rebel. And Gia is explaining to her that the proof is ironclad and that even if she doesn't sign it, they still know enough that Gin is going down either way. So she may as well play along, because even if she refuses for the sake of her honor, it will not actually change the outcome of anything. It will just be her doing something for her own pride that won't have an effect and will hurt her, not only her, but her mother as well. And we will get to exactly what that's about. But first I want to talk about like poor ZOMI realizing that she has been used. At this moment, generals loyal to the throne have already seized control of the army of Gejira and occupied the queen's palace. The fugitives have been arrested. But you told me... ZOMI stopped. A complex series of expressions transformed her face. Disbelief, anger, fear, and eventually bitter acceptance. And she's just like, oh, so you fucking lied to me. I get it. And Gia's like, yeah, so it's funny that you bring up lies because I wanted to show you something. And she goes and gets some papers and brings them back. And it's a pass Many of the squares had names written on them, along with the seals of the various governors and enfeoffed nobles. She didn't need to unfold the paper to know that there would be a square missing. So this is like the series of passes that are meant to signify that you have been granted the highest position because of the examination. And this is something that there's this huge story behind. So those of you who have been following along from the beginning and reading along from the beginning, remember that we first meet ZOMI in a tavern, essentially, when she goes up against this dude and she has this like examination pass, or it's not a pass. It's like, well, it is. I can't remember the name of the actual object. But it gets destroyed. And because the kids that got her involved, Kuni's kids, feel responsible, they assist in getting a replacement for her from Queen Gin, as it turns out. And what we wind up finding out is that ZOMI did not actually have a valid pass. She had one that she stole that was not signed. And she had like forged a signature, but it would have become pretty quickly clear that she had forged it, and she would not have been able to continue to like present her thesis to the emperor. So in truth, this guy who destroyed the pass that she had that was forged did her a huge favor, because these kids just happened to be around to get her a legitimate one signed by Queen Gin when the one that she had was not for real. And they thought they were replacing something she already had, but they were not. And it's a real moment for me that I love. Like there's so much. I'm going to get kind of emotional here, guys. In the past few years, I have realized more than ever how much the way that our lives play out depends on dumb luck. And there is so much that people don't want to admit that, because nobody wants something that they have no control over, like luck, to determine the way their life goes. So we tell ourselves all these stories about how we have control, how if you just like live a certain way and do things a certain way, that things will inevitably turn out for you, because there's just no way it can't if you complete this list of tasks. And it's so not that simple. And the fact that ZOMI wound up offending somebody by accident that was like kind of key when it came down to it, so that she was refused a pass despite having this amazing score, it's only fair that ZOMI similarly be granted this luck of running into the emperor's kids so that she can get another chance at that pass. She is pretty hard on herself and thinks about how, like, because she stole it, that she, like, her past has not got any honor, that this is a stain on her. I completely disagree. For me, this was the universe fixing a mistake. This was the gods stepping in and being like, no, ZOMI, you totally deserved this, and we are finding a way to get it to you. And she's just like, she can't see it that way, because ZOMI is kind of like me in that she is a rule follower, but I want her to follow different rules and recognize that this bit of luck that she got is no more undeserved than the luck of being born privileged in a position where you are taken seriously by default. Being born a man, being born wealthy, being born with a certain level of innate intelligence is an accident. And you winding up with this pass that you had actually earned, by the way, despite all the odds, is not dishonorable. it's kind of a miracle and I think should be celebrated. She does not see it that way. I get that. But I think she should rethink it. And how many people, like, guys, just from my perspective, as a podcaster, many of you know me from the Harry Potter podcast that I started. And there is another podcast that started about a year after mine called Potterless, which was a similar idea where there is somebody who has never read Harry Potter before, and they are consuming all of the books along with co-hosts, plural, guest co-hosts. So that was what made it different, who have read them and are spoiled on them and discussing them chapter by chapter. And it was one of those things that when it first came out, I was kind of like, wow, okay, just took my idea. But then I saw that there were differences and I was kind of like, okay, it's not really just like the same thing. But then I saw that this show had only been out for, I think it was out a total of like 3 months, and it was exploding. It was hugely popular. It had thousands of reviews on iTunes already. And I was just like, why is this person who is doing something so similar to me, but whom I don't think has really like completely nailed what's so great about the Unspoiled experience, why are they so popular? And I came to find out that he accidentally got put on Spotify's front page by accident for like 2 straight months. It was when Spotify first introduced podcasts to their feeds, and he had posted his on there, and they did this thing where he just like was one of the only Harry Potter podcasts, and he just got put up on the front page for months at a time. And that was all. He did not do anything. He did not even ask for that. He simply fell backward into success because he got lucky, because somebody made a mistake. And now he is like a featured guest at LeakyCon. He has so much success because of a mistake that somebody else made. And I'm not bitter at podcasters for this, but it is a sobering thing to realize that success is not dependent on your hard work. Success is not dependent on your talent. It has nothing to do with that. It can often and usually is due to some small accident like that. You happen to meet the right person at the right time. You happen to make the right choice with a keyword that you use for something that winds up being trending on Twitter the next day. Your tweet happens to get the attention of the right celebrity, and it gets retweeted to 65,000 people. All of these things are a complete anomaly. You have no control over whether that happens to you or not. But it's a determining factor. And so there is a huge part of me that feels such bitterness over that. And I want to reiterate, I'm not angry at Potterless. He can't help what somebody else did. And I don't blame him for reaping the rewards of that at all. But it feels so discouraging to work so fucking hard at something for years and years, give everything you have, and risk so much, and to only incrementally step forward, while someone else who does something as a lark for their hobby winds up exploding in a way that you could only have ever dreamed of. It's just unfair. That's the facts. It's not fair. So, people want to believe in the just world. People want to believe that things happen for reasons, that ultimately everything is going to work out. We have no guarantee of that. And I have not seen that to be true in the way the world works. I have seen things work out for people. That's not to say that everything is always so terrible, but I am saying that we have this idea that eventually it will all work out. I used to really buy into this saying that was everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, then it's not the end. And that the question for me nowadays is, everything will be all right for who? Who is that about? Because it certainly won't be all right for everybody. It can't be. That's just not how things work. So, so I feel for ZOMI so hard throughout this entire thing. And I want her so bad to embrace this bit of luck that she got here, because nobody else who has gotten the luck of privilege ever seems to feel bad about that. Nobody ever seems to think that they did not earn what they got. They all are perfectly willing to take credit for things that they hadn't had any control over. ZOMI, embrace that shit. Don't feel bad about it. This is your leg up, and it's unfortunate that it's being used against you and you're being blackmailed for it now. But at the same time, personally, don't blame yourself. I know other people are going to see it a certain way, but I don't want you to internalize that feeling, girl. That is not on you. That's not your fault. It's not your fault, the class that you were born into, and it's not your fault that this petty bitch had your past taken away from you. It's not, none of that is your fault. You were doing your best. You were the most talented, the most correct, and you stood up for people who could not stand up for themselves with this fucking woman. You did everything right, and you should be proud of yourself. You managed to tell this bitch off, have her take your pass away, and still got in there and got your voice heard. You are not to be faulted for any of that. You are a fucking rock star, and I love you. And please, please, please don't feel bad about it. But I know she does, because she's a rule follower. But yeah. So we get this story about how she goes to this dinner, and she's with, this is after, she has taken the grand examination. And she had the highest score of all the Tokudaiji who had achieved the rank of Kashima in years. And out of the 10 or so recommendations that Regent Raoulu would hand out, one would have to have her name on it. After all, that was the point of the examinations, to pick out men and women of talent to serve the emperor. Many of the Kashima had gone to school together or knew each other by the prominence of their families, and they now conversed in small cliques. ZOMI didn't know anyone and wandered around by herself. There was much wine and fish served raw and dipped in the spicy sauces that Dasu was famous for. Her stomach was unused to the wine, no doubt expensive, and the fish roe, a delicacy. So, first of all, I'm getting really emotional here. A lot of you know that I went to a private boarding school for my senior year of high school. I found out that a lot of the arts programs at the school I was going to were about to be cut, and art was going to be my major. It was the thing that I was winning awards for left and right in high school. I won a lot. I won several $1,000s worth of awards. And I was just like, why am I staying at this school if they don't value what I'm doing? So I found this school that it was like $25,000 a year to go. I saw that they gave scholarships, and I applied. And I got a scholarship for $22,000. And I went. And I don't regret going. But it certainly was eye-opening. Because I was, without a doubt, the poorest student at that school. Came from the poorest family, for sure. And it was a lonely feeling. You are surrounded by people who simply do not understand what it's like to not be able to have a thing. And you are surrounded by people who judge for details that you would never expect to be judged by. Like that just, it doesn't even occur to you because that's not part of what you notice about people. And you see these people taking for granted these lifestyles and these opportunities that you would literally give an organ for. And they simply don't see the big deal. And it's really I didn't quite understand my loneliness at the time. And it was a confusing time because I had been incredibly popular at my old school. And when I came to this new school, I just didn't have the same vibe with everybody. And I couldn't understand what was holding me back from that. And I came to realize, like, after a little bit, that maybe it was just, I was used to being like one of the most talented people at the school. And now I was in a school full of talented kids. And maybe it was just that I was like now a small fish in a big pond and that was it. But looking back, I realized that I felt lonely. That was certainly part of it. Small fish in a big pond is a very real thing. But I felt at a loss because I had talent that I could not utilize or that didn't count for as much as the simple like backgrounds of a lot of the kids at these schools, their parents knowing each other, I had several classmates. My roommate at this boarding school, her father wrote The Wonder Years, and she went to school before going to my school with Denzel Washington's kids, kind of thing. It was a whole like Hollywood like network that I was dropped into, not understanding or even knowing that's what it was going to be when I joined. And man, hearing other people talking about folks that are from your class around you without either knowing that you are from the class they're talking about or caring because you matter so little to them that they would be totally fine talking about you this way to your face, even if they knew. It's an alienating feeling. And this scene with ZOMI, she goes to the bathroom and she's looking for toilet paper, essentially. And she's looking around and she can't find it. And she asks somebody if they have anything when they come in. And the dude is like, they don't have anything in there. Oh, he's going to be really mad that they ran out here. And he hands her a stack of silk handkerchiefs, which were in the stall with her, but which she understandably did not fucking think were fucking toilet paper because they're silk fucking handkerchiefs. She has literally never owned anything worth as much as these handkerchiefs. And they are literally wiping their asses with them and throwing them away. Like, what, you know? And yeah, 100% how I felt a couple times with the way that these kids were like, they would be given hundreds of dollars in like pocket money for a weekend. And then they would like go away and drink and smoke a ton of weed and just completely. And meanwhile, I was over there trying to win these awards for artwork at school so that I could buy a sewing machine and get into costuming school. That was what I was doing with my money. And these kids were just like, you know, and it was just, ugh, guys, there's just no way to understand if you haven't seen this kind of wealth up close, how alien a fucking lifestyle it can be. So understandably, ZOMI is in a certain fucking eat the rich frame of mind when she comes out of the fucking bathroom. And there is this woman telling a story about how there was a beggar girl that came to her door wanting food and that she ordered the servants to give her some leftover porridge. And the girl squatted down right in the kitchen and started slurping really noisily. And this woman found both the squatting and the slurping to be incredibly rude and low class and just generally embarrassing. And she's telling this story about how like hilarious it is that this person had no culture. And ZOMI gets fed up and explains this woman came from a family too poor to afford sitting mats. And when she saw your beautiful floor, she didn't want to sit because she knew that her clothes were dirty and she was going to dirty your floor. She slurped because that customarily is how you indicate that you are enjoying something, and she was trying to let you know that she appreciated what you did for her. And pretty much you're over here criticizing her lack of manners when the manners that really need work are yours. And this woman gets really, really angry and winds up, it turns out, sabotaging ZOMI. ZOMI not only criticizes this woman here, but then gets into a squat herself and begins to eat and slurp in a way that like offends this woman right up in her face, in what I think might be the most baller move I've ever heard of. Like, honestly, she is just straight up kind of humiliating herself to make a point. And that takes the kind of guts I hope I have someday, but definitely don't now. ZOMI is just my fucking hero, and I love her to death. Only later in the evening did she find out that Lady Lom was the favored wife of Regent Ra-Olu. She waited with the other Kashima for the elect to be announced, and she heard the regent call out 9 names and then stop instead of giving the expected 10th. So she goes up to the regent and is like, what the fuck? And the regent says, scores aren't everything, and then walks away. And ZOMI understood what she should have always understood. Talent was not enough. There were webs of privilege and power that were just as important, if not more important, than talent. Hint, it's more important. So she turned away and quietly let down her hair from the triple scroll bun of a Kashima. In her plain clothes, she looked undistinguishable from the servants clearing away the dishes and cups. She grabbed a stack of plates, stopped by the table where the passes were held, and slipped the last signed but blank pass into her sleeve. So, that's how she got it. But I maintain that she had earned that shit. And it even says she had not thought that it was wrong because it belonged to her. Later on, she rationalized if she did well, her theft would remain a secret because the regent would say nothing and he would be rewarded for having recommended a successful candidate. She had hoped that success would make her feel like she belonged, but deep down, she had always known her honor was stolen. There was a stain at the origin of her success that could never be erased. Wrong. There's a stain at the origin of everyone's success. You fit in just fine. That's what makes you fit in. Get used to it, kid. Seriously. So the Empress is like, yeah, wow, what a stroke of luck that you lost your pass and you were able to get another one. And you've got to realize that I could easily present the fact that you had a stolen pass as evidence that Gin Mazzotti was like part of a conspiracy to cheat the grand examination. So not only will I ruin you, but that will just be another nail in her coffin, and you will be tossed in prison, and your mother will lose everything and perhaps be whipped for breeding a daughter of such poor character. Which, holy fucking balls, Gia, you are a demon. I hate you so much right now. And it makes me so upset because Gia feels like Gin is her enemy. And while obviously Gin is talented and powerful and certainly does not really seem to like Gia, I think Gia could have worked more with Gin. And she just decided that she wanted to replace somebody who was on Rasana's side without really like asking herself whether there was something that could be done about that. You know, she doesn't have any like conversations. She doesn't make any attempts at working together and becoming allies. And I just feel like she is going scorched earth here in a way that's like not necessary. And it's just so hard to watch. Oh, I hate it. ZOMI thought about her teacher. That's not the moral. I don't care. I only care about people close to me. And I said when that line came up, I was like, ooh, that feels like it's going to be important. So she thinks about what the right thing is to do. And she finally is just like, all right, you win. and we wind up seeing what happens. I'm going to speed through chapter 31 a little because I'm running out of time and I have so much left to cover. But Gin gets visited by Gia without warning really early the next morning. And they are completely taking her off balance on purpose. And the whole time that Gin is being led out, she is certain that something's wrong. But she's also like, there's no way. Kuni can't possibly like think this of me. He wouldn't do this to me. I don't buy it. And it's awful because it's like, as a reader that Kuni has not sanctioned this. But then you see the conversation between him and Rosanna later, and he is like just enough convinced by this evidence that it's not totally clear whether he would have made a different decision were he here to do so. And that's the part that hurts the most, is that you want to be able to just say, Gia is taking these drastic measures without Kuni around, but Gia is so good at manipulating him, and she has set up all of the pieces so very carefully that were Kuni here, I don't know that this wouldn't have turned out the same way. I don't know. So this is just, it's so sad because Gin is just, Kuni will never turn against me, she thought. It doesn't matter what the Empress thinks. If she acts against me, it will only prove what I've surmised from Noda-mi and Doru Solofi, which, that's important. It seems as if Gin has figured out what Gia has been up to, which, Gin, oh baby, I hope that you live long enough to tell somebody your theory, because that is some serious shit, and I hope you do. So let's go to 32. We see Theka Kimo, and this is the Battle of Arulugi. Theka Kimo versus Puma Yemu. And we get some really this is something that has been missing from this book because it has been a time of peace. We get some really dope battle scenes and some really fun tactical work. So there's they're fighting on the water. There's this whole deal with the fact that they are each trying to use fire to fight the other, but that does not work as they're on the water high. So finally, one of them comes up with the idea. Puma Yemu is like, oh, you know what we're going to do? He directed the Imperial airships to work in concert and airlift some small assault boats from the sea to a secluded cove. During the darkest hours of each night, he ordered the airships to harass Kimo's navy. However, instead of dropping firebombs and burning oil, the airships doused the ships with water. And this means that the torches go out, that their firework powder is ruined. All of this stuff that they had been using is useless, and they are blind. And Rosanna is raising a fog. And I love this so much. So they begin to cause them to see these foes shooting arrows and attacking, but it's not real. They're just freaking out because of this smoke work that she's doing. And it says, while the sailors and marines of Arulugi shouted and shot at these insubstantial foes, small Imperial assault boats advanced on the large Arulugi ships through the inky night like tiny remoras, silently approaching much larger sharks and whales. The soldiers aboard drilled holes through the hulls of the warships and filled them with bombs made of firework powder. After lighting the fuses, the assault boats pulled away. Kimo's men were able to get the torches relit just as the bombs exploded, ripping out huge chunks from the ship's hulls. And I just love this. It's just, I have missed it, and I don't think I even realized that I missed it because I have been loving the court intrigue and everything so much. And then there's this whole other thing where they wind up they are given a break. The not Puma Yemu's men, Theka's men are given a chance to take a break and go into town and get drunk, because the guys have been so heavily harassed at night that their morale is like at an all-time low, and a lot of them are low-key thinking about deserting because they just feel exhausted and worn out. And they come back, where is it? Drunk and exhausted from an evening of dancing, teetered over Muning's hallway, hanging walkways, shouts erupting from around the city in the lake. The city has fallen. The emperor promises leniency for any officer or soldier who surrenders and fights for the empire. Whoever captures the traitor Thekokimo will be given a fief of his own. Kano Tho and Thekokimo rushed onto the suspended platforms around the palace. The suspended platforms were collapsing in thick columns of acrid smoke, turning the city into a fiery web. Soldiers rushed around, aimless, while officers shouted ineffectually. Groups of men dressed in imperial uniforms swung from spire to spire, setting more fires and slaughtering the confused, drunken Arulugi soldiers stumbling around. And at this point, Kanutho is just like, fuck, we have been tricked. You just need to get the fuck out of here. If the king and his advisors had spent their night seated by the lake, they would have seen how Marquess Yemu's troops had, under cover of darkness, crossed the lake on large rafts. So yeah, they didn't set up enough of a watch, and these guys are like, they are on it. While Yemu's raiders had harassed the Arulugi navy, the imperial army had been secretly collecting vines from the jungle on shore. The distracted Arulugi forces had not detected any massive construction effort in the jungle and assumed that the Imperials were not building ships. In fact, they had completely missed the primitive and rickety rafts, which could only be of use across an unguarded, serene lake. So good. So good. So then we have this terrible, terrible scene, guys. I really hated this. During the fall, many of Thekokimo's generals had surrendered because they just realized, like, oh yeah, we're losing. It's too late. Bereft of supporters, save for about 2,000 hardened rebels, Thekokimo was making a last stand at the western tip of Arulugi. With his back to the endless sea and the dense ranks of the imperial troops before him like so many impenetrable walls, Thekokimo's days were numbered. So he goes to Kuni's camp, intending to get an audience with Kuni. And it doesn't go the way he planned, because Kuni will not see him. I was wrong to rebel, and I beg you now for mercy. Remember that I abandoned the hegemon to serve you at a time when it was not clear who between the two of you would emerge victorious. And he keeps talking as the guards basically kneel him at the block, move his hair out of the way. Your son called me uncle. I taught him how to swing his toy sword. I lost 2 toes from the bitter cold at the siege of Ranakita. I have hundreds of scars over my body from fighting your wars. I should never have let my fears feed my ambition. I ask only that you leave me my life. And they like move his shirt down out of the way. They get the axe out. Kuni Guru, why won't you come and see me? I know if you see me, you won't give the order. You've always been a merciful Lord. Have I not earned my life with all that I have done for you? Where are you? Do you not know, Puma Yemu, that you are next? Where are you, Than Kurukono? Do you believe your friendship shields you? Where are you, Marshal Mazzotti? Did you not promise that I will not be chopped down as long? And he is killed in the middle of that monologue. And it says Kuni Guru never emerged. For 3 days, the emperor refused to see anyone. Now, I think that is an indication that Thekokimo was right. He says, if you saw me, you would not give the order. And I think he's dead ass correct. Kuni would not have given the order, and that is why he didn't come out. He knew that he wouldn't have the stomach for it. And while part of me is like, good on you for knowing your limits and like working within that, I honestly am so frustrated at the fact that Kuni is handling it this way. And then is like, hiding in his tent, grieving after letting somebody else do the work for him. And that's essentially what he winds up doing with Gin as well, and Jia. So Kuni is in the middle of mourning, having executed his friend who he thought was loyal, when he gets the message about Queen Gin. And he doesn't know what to do. He's sort of there's a part of him, I think, that is just broken at this point. And I guess that he's sort of beginning to understand what the hegemon was feeling, because Kuni never felt the way the hegemon does about the honor and loyalty of his people, because Kuni understood that you have to earn that, whereas the hegemon felt that it was simply something he deserved. But Kuni feels that he has earned that, and now he is still not getting it, and that's the difference for him here. And he thinks to himself, I came to power from an act of betrayal. Perhaps it is justice that I may fall from just such another betrayal. So Thankaru Kono is trying to tell Kuni that maybe there's a mistake. We know that Jia has never liked Gin. And Kuni is just dude, she's been harboring the guys who were in charge of the rebellion. Her own advisor says that she was planning to rebel. All of the evidence is against her here. And Thankaru Kono is in that weird place where he's all of the logic here is correct. And I'm not mad at you for thinking that this is true because of the logic behind it. But it doesn't feel right. And Kuni also feels this way. He's just I smell a rat and I don't know what it is. So he writes this letter and he sends it to be exclusively seen by Defiro Miro, and tells the messenger, I want you to watch him read it and then destroy it before you come back. And then we go to chapter 33 with Gin Mazzotti. And she is approached by Defiro, who it turns out has been given orders to help her escape, because Kuni is not totally convinced that she is guilty. And Gin is not willing to do this. And at first I was kind of girl, what are you doing? Because he makes a really good argument about yeah, I understand that your name and your reputation are everything, but you're about to die being thought of as a traitor. Whereas if you escape now, who knows how things may change for you. And that can only happen if you stay fucking alive. But she says, I love this so much. If I do as you ask, I will never be able to clear my name. I will not give Kuni the satisfaction of having it both ways. He wants to assuage his conscience while his wife does the dirty work of clearing his doubt. He wants the love and trust of his old retainers while they're disarmed, disgraced, and distanced from the levels of power. He thinks he can have the love of the people as well as the praise of the Lord, the loyalty of his old friends as well as the bought affection of old enemies. He thinks he can balance all the forces around him and resolve everything by secret compromise. But in matters of honor, there is only wrong or right. Let him choose and live with his choice. I'm not mad at her for that. I think she's being a little hard on him because, she has to know what this looks like. But at the same time, I do think Kuni is trying to have it his way, have it both ways, as she puts it. He wants her to live and wants to feel good about it, while on the surface supporting his wife and acting as if he believes the evidence against Gin. And that's not how it goes. He either has to stand up for her publicly and make it clear that he doesn't believe these allegations, or he has to execute her and take responsibility completely for that decision. And I think she's right. And I hate that she's on the chopping block here. And I really hope that she doesn't die. I really, really hope. But we'll see. So then we have chapter 34, Unexpected News. And I am so close to the end of my time here. it's a conversation between Rosanna and Kuni. And she's like, I don't buy it. You don't think she really rebelled. And you know that I can see into the hearts and desires of a lot of people. And I can see that Gin's loyalty to you hasn't wavered. So why are you letting Gia do this? And he says what I said last episode, which is that Gin's primary flaw is pride. And Gin never made any efforts to placate Gia. She kept on sort of flaunting her position and making pointed comments. She didn't try to make peace with them, between the two of them. I'm doing what I can. And Rosanna says she's gone too far, though. And even if Gin has committed indiscretions, she deserves your mercy. And he's trying to explain that, you know, it'll make things worse if I stay the execution. The Empress has made a strong enough case that I would still have to strip her of her title. And she'd have to live without this power. This would kill her. Like, I don't know that that would be any better. And then if there is a rebellion that continues, she's going to be out there not employed by me anymore, giving her extreme talent to somebody else. And I don't know that my kids taking over for me are going to be able to handle her. And Rosanna's like, okay, so I guess you're just going along with everything that Gia has decided here. Cool. And then she says, I fear that she will not stop until my son and I are both dead. And Kuni says that it won't come to that. And Rosanna says, do you think your judgment has been blinded by affection for the Empress and guilt at what she suffered on your behalf during the war with the hegemon? And Kuni doesn't exactly answer her. He responds to the question with another question. And this is when they get interrupted with news from Timu. And he reads it and he sort of freezes in place. And then he backs up and pulls out his lute and begins to play this mournful song. And it's this like, it's a moment where it feels like he got news that Timu is dead. But then we find out that something else like way more dramatic has happened. Summon 2 messengers. One will go to Thekakimo's remaining troops and offer them amnesty. The other will go to Pan and bring the Empress a copy of this letter. Any orders to the Empress from you? Kuni shook his head. Gia will know what she must do. So, chapter 35, The Tempest from the North, the coming of the city ships. And this is pretty dope, but it's something that I can cover pretty quickly. So, in the northernmost part of Dara, we have all of these ships, like a flotilla of what looks like hundreds, potentially maybe even 1,000, that are coming down, and they are some of the most enormous ships anybody has ever seen. And all of the people in this area flee, because as far as they're concerned, this is definitely pirates and they are all going to be killed. May as well get the fuck out of the way, let the pirates take what they're going to take, and then you can come back and clean up the mess after they're gone. And they flee. Eventually, some people do go and like explain to a few villagers had the presence of mind to run to the garrison commanders to report the raid. Hopefully, the report could be passed on to Prince Timu in time to organize some semblance of a rescue operation. And Prince Timu is like, all right, I'm going to defer to people who know shit this time. But they don't totally know what to do here either. They are defending the garrison from what they think is an approaching like pack of pirates. And it turns out that these are people carrying children, you know, just regular families. And it turns out that they are fleeing from the attack. So even the most hardened veteran soldier faced with a sight of thousands of men and women crying for mercy could not remain unmoved. The archers' arms slackened, and most stopped shooting as they looked to the commanding officer for direction. But he was no longer looking at the pirates. Beyond the crowd of refugees, beyond their abandoned ships, a wooden wall topped with immense sails, clean and white like the surf, loomed over the horizon. 20 massive ships, each as tall as the watchtowers of Pan and as big as a small town, bobbed over the waves. I am dying to know what the fuck this is about. I have to think it's for like that you know, the whole fact that like so many people like took boats and left and never came back, but their bodies were never found. So I'm wondering if like ZOMI's father's mixed up in there, her brothers maybe, like I don't know. But Prince Timu has to like figure out what to do. And these guys, some of them are saying you should attack right now because they're clearly like desperate pirates. And Zato Ruthie is like, well, I mean, what, even if they did attack the pirates, it may be that the pirates provoked the strangers first. There's like this whole like argument between who is on these giant city ships. And there's even theories that maybe like they're immortals, which understandable that you would feel that way. Like, who the fuck is this? And if you won't believe the word of pirates, who are, after all, men of Dara, why would you assume the intention of the strangers is friendly? Because the pirates have proven themselves to be lawless criminals motivated only by greed, but we know nothing of these strangers. As Kunfiji says, embrace the stranger who comes over the sea, and the stranger will embrace you. So I don't, like, the pirates came first pursued by city ships, but it appears that they are not like related to one another, but I kind of wonder if they aren't actually still, but because they haven't like reached out to them, they haven't found out. They were each about 180 feet in length with hulls shaped like sleek dolphins. These were not the largest ships of the fleet, which following designs dating back to the time of Emperor Mapidere tended to approach 300 feet in length, but they were newer and faster and were far more kind on the imperial treasury. These are the airships. Below them, a 2,000 strong honor guard arrayed itself on the top of the hill. And we find out like all of these townsfolk are like theorizing about like how to maybe take advantage of the immortals, maybe marrying in or breeding with them, selling real estate to them. It is kind of hilarious. And Zato Ruthie sets out to parley with them. And it says Ruthie and his guards merged into the distant camp. Everyone's gaze followed the flag, now flickering like a tiny flame in a snowfield. What sights and wonders was Ruthie witnessing? And that is the end of the chapter. So we don't get to find out. And I'm dying now. So I better wrap. I'm over time, but thank you very much again to Kyle for commissioning this. This has been super fun to read. And I hope you all have been enjoying the coverage. I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.